As you have been hearing, the BC Conservative Party is contesting results from the last provincial election. Now, Elections BC says it is reviewing a series of complaints from the Conservatives, and a petition is going to the Supreme Court with a request to invalidate the results in the riding of Surrey-Guildford. And that's where Conservative candidate Honveer Singh Randhawa lost by just 22 votes to NDP candidate Gary Begg. The party is also alleging other irregularities in the election process, and BC Conservative Party leader John Rustad joins us on the line this morning. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Thank you very much for taking the time, as always. You have a very detailed list of concerns and complaints here, several of them targeting the riding of Surrey-Guildford. There was a judicial recount of the results in that riding that was conducted by Justice Kevin Liu of the BC Supreme Court on November 8th. And after that recount was finished and the results were finalized, you yourself agreed with the outcome of the election. There were two other judicial recounts. Both ended with wins for the Conservatives. So what is it in particular about the riding of Surrey-Guildford and the judicial recount there that you don't trust?
So the judicial recount was fine, and that's why we accepted, what we saw at the time. And what we saw at the time, of course, was the information that everybody else had. It's what we have discovered afterwards that has become so troubling. In terms of the irregularities that had been propping up, and not just in Surrey-Guildford, but in other ridings. And so that's why we felt it was important not to come out and sort of make accusations, but to actually do the work, go and look and find the evidence that was needed, and then to be able to bring it forward in a manner that not only has the opportunity to contest that riding, but most importantly, that we can get to the bottom of just what all these problems are to protect, quite frankly, the democratic process in BC.
And how did these alleged irregularities come to your attention?
A number of people came forward with with issues. For example, there was a case where an individual did not vote. Says he did not vote, and yet there's a vote registered in his name. Another individual who came forward who went to go and vote, and Election BC told them, saying, "I'm sorry, but you've already voted." We've had numerous cases of people who were not Canadian citizens who voted. For example, that Elections BC sent out the letters or the cards for voting information to people who are permanent residents, who are not Canadian citizens.
Do you have?
We have other cases of people who registered as a permanent resident and took their BC ID down and went and voted, and nobody asked any questions.
And
so, there's all kinds of these issues that came up.
Certainly, and with this, do you have any evidence of any of this actually occurring beyond someone saying so?
So we actually do, which is what will be presented in court. We have affidavits from individuals, particularly when it came to a seniors facility and how voting took place there, as well as looking at people who do not live in Surrey-Guildford riding who voted in that riding. So this is evidence that we've collected and bringing forward. We have actually more evidence that is still pending. People have approached us. We're looking at additional affidavits from both within that riding as well as in other ridings.
And does that include the statutory declarations and statements that you've included in the package that you sent to media yesterday?
The information that we have not got that is yet coming in, we did not include in the information we released yesterday.
All right. So again, you're alleging that people who are not Canadian citizens voted specifically in this riding then?
In this riding, as well as in other ridings in the province. And the problem, of course, with the information around people who are not Canadian citizens is no one's going to stand up and swear an affidavit to say, please give me a fine and send me to jail. And this is why we are asking for a couple of things in terms of changes, short-term changes that are needed. First is we need to give a period of time. We need to suspend the penalty rules around the Elections Act so that people can come forward and give their stories about why they voted and collect this sort of information without there being the consequences, so we can actually fix the problems that we have in our electoral system.
But that seems to be the some result of all of these allegations is that you believe there's a serious problem with free and fair elections in British Columbia, do you?
There's no question in my mind that there are issues that have come up. Now, how large that issue is, it's hard to know. We've had, people that are telling us that there are over 800 people in one particular riding that weren't Canadian citizens voted.
But again, you have people telling.
We got no way to prove that.
Yeah, well, exactly, and that's it. I mean, without evidence, how do you say? How can you be sure that any of this actually happened without presenting
we have
evidence
of the other things that we have talked about, even including an individual who voted under the same person voted under two different names. So that's the evidence that we're presenting. But what we need in order to get to the bottom of these issues, particularly for the people that are not Canadian citizens, we need to have this investigation, but we need to be able to suspend those rules so we can collect this information without people having fear that there's going to be serious consequences. And it's clear in my mind as well, what is Election BC doing between elections? If there are people who are on the voters list who are not Canadian citizens and they send out an invitation for them to vote, what have they done? And
but
why
again,
is
that's
this happening? This needs to be looked at.
Yes, again, but the word "if" goes before that. Do we know whether that's actually happening?
We know that actually happened. And the problem is we're not going to present the names of the individuals that this happened to because we don't want them to go to jail.
You also pointed, as you mentioned, John, you pointed to irregularities or alleged irregularities at Argyle Lodge, which we've just spoken about. The owner and the manager of that lodge, Baljit Kandola, says that she is, in her words, shocked by these allegations because voting at the residence has been conducted by mail-in ballot, exactly the same way it was in the last election for the past 30 years. I just want you to hear what she told us at CBC News.
I think it's really absurd, and I'm just shocked actually, because this is the same way our clients have been casting their votes for over last 30-some years. We never contact the elections, commission. They in fact contact us. Okay, your clients, you want us to drop them off, and then they complete, and then they pick them up. I think this year or the last year, they asked us to mail them.
So that is Baljit Kandola, the owner of Argyle Lodge there, denying any irregularity took place. Did you happen to survey any other residential care facilities to find out whether they also use mail-in ballots?
We have actually got a number of other residential care facilities where there are some things that we are still doing investigation. But when it comes to Argyle, look, the Act is very clear. Where you have somebody in care, one individual can support one person in care to vote. You don't have one individual doing all of the people in care to vote.
And again, how do you know that? Okay, and how do you know that took place?
Because we have the affidavits from the people who live in that facility, and that's what's coming forward to court.
Who's the lawyer who accepted these affidavits, by the way? I see that's been redacted.
Well, you'll see that when that comes forward. That's not something I can disclose at this time.
Okay. But you're asking, among what you're asking for is you want to know who the 21 individual residents of Argyle Lodge were who were listed as voting by mail. Is that correct? That's in your news release. You would like to know the names of those people, would you?
That's all stuff that will come out when it comes time to dealing with this issue. Should this proceed in court, which I suspect it will.
Okay. Another thing you're asking for, another concern of yours, is that you say that Argyle Lodge is across the street from Guildford Park Secondary School, the nearest polling station, located just 80 meters away. What does that have to do with anything?
Well, it's the question is, for people who are mobile, and there's many people in that facility who are mobile, why didn't they just cross the road to vote, as opposed to requiring a mail-in ballot? So it just adds to the question mark about the process that is undertaken and has been undertaken clearly for years, according to the owner or manager of that facility.
Did you look at the proximity of other residential facilities to polling stations anywhere else in the Lower Mainland or in Surrey?
There's still additional work, I say, that we're doing with regards to that. But the challenge we have here and the issue here is there is certainly something that smells wrong with this. And this is why it needs to be investigated. This is why we're taking it forward. This does not seem to be right in terms of how we are protecting the integrity of voting in our elections in British Columbia.
So did you check then with how other residential facilities assist people when they're filling up mail-in voter packages then? Did you determine whether there's any standard among other residential facilities?
We are in the process of doing the engagement with other facilities. We're doing that research and work that needs to be done, and we're hopeful that in the coming weeks and time ahead we will have this. But the challenge is this a pattern? Is this a problem that has been a part of the election process for years? Is it a problem at all? It certainly sounds like a problem. It sounds like a contravention of the Elections Act as the Elections Act is read. So we'll find out whether this irregularities, is something serious enough to have to warrant a much broader investigation.
John, I do have a couple more questions, but I'd like to take a quick break for traffic. Can we do that?
Sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It is 9 minutes before 8 o'clock. John Rustad is our guest. He's the leader of the BC Conservative Party. Amy Bell is here with traffic and weather.
Busy morning, just clearing the last of a crash northbound at the north end of the Alex Fraser Bridge. Volume actually improving there, so I suspect all lanes have been reopened now. Still heavy on Highway 1 as you're coming out of the Cape Horn all through Burnaby and towards Vancouver, and quite jam-packed getting into the Cassiar tunnels. Coming off the North Shore for the ironworkers, there's no delays. It's still in great shape both directions, really, for the Lions Gate, and moderate delays for the Richmond bridges. Rain tapering off in some areas, but lingering for a while yet. And then we'll see sunny breaks, windy conditions this afternoon with a high of 8. I'll have another look before the news.
Thank you very much, Amy. John Rustad is our guest. He is, of course, the leader of the BC Conservative Party, and that party is contesting the results from the last provincial election, or at least has filed a complaint about irregularities when it comes to the election, or alleged irregularities. Now, John, what form would you like to see an investigation take here?
So I think the most important thing to look at here is like I say, the integrity of our electoral system. There's lots of people who have lost confidence in our system. There's lots of people, who obviously are not voting because they're worried about these sort of things.
How do you know that?
It's important to have that integrity. Well, you can see the voter turnout is down, and there's certainly, all you got to do is go to social media and see where people's comments are.
Okay, so you're saying the voter turnout is down and people are saying things on social media, and therefore that people have lost confidence in the electoral system.
There is, you can see it for yourself in terms of the media, in terms of the responses. But the important part here is this. In order to make sure that our electoral system is solid and that people accept it and we protect, quite frankly, democracy, we need an independent review of this election, quite frankly, of how the election was undertaken by Elections BC, of the Election Act as well. And another thing that we need, I actually believe that from going forward, we should, on all photo ID that's issued by the province that's used by Elections BC, a C should be on those IDs so that it's clear whether you're a Canadian citizen or not. After all, that is what the core of democracy in British Columbia and in Canada is you need to be a Canadian citizen to participate.
Right. And again, you're alleging that when we spoke with Elections BC about the last election in 2020, they told us that there were 2 cases of non-Canadian citizens attempting to vote. Out of all of the ballots cast, there were 2 cases of Canadian citizens who tried to cast ballots. Both of those were identified as non-Canadian citizens and explained and had explained to them why they were not eligible to vote. Does that require a change in identification so people carry with them every day?
Well, I suppose if you have complete and utter confidence in the way that Elections BC is conducted, then that's what you would conclude. But when I know, and I've seen people receiving notifications from Elections BC that are not Canadian citizens and invitations to vote, clearly something is not happening the way it should. And so this is the type of thing that we need to look at. We need to reassure people that this is being done properly.
So you'll be able to produce then that evidence that Elections BC has invited non-Canadian citizens to vote. You've got evidence of that somewhere, do you?
If we can get to a place where we can suspend the penalties under the Election Act so that we won't be seeing people going to jail for bringing forward this information to help protect and improve our electoral process, then yes, we'll be able to present that. But otherwise, I'm not going to be asking people to jeopardize, their future and both financially as well as their freedoms.
Tell me why Mr. Randhawa is pursuing this by himself and why this is not an action of the party.
Under the Election Act, the only parties that can bring forward something to court is the candidate, an electoral officer, or a voter in a riding, a political party cannot actually bring forward an action in court with regards to this type of affair.
You participated in a year-end interview with our legislative reporter, Katie DeRosa, and you said essentially that you'll take any opportunity you can find to topple David Eby's NDP government. Exactly what you said was, this is a quote by you, "They'll likely want to hold on as long as they can. We'll see whether or not we have an opportunity to change that outcome." Is this you doing that?
This is actually this is different from that. I mean, under what I was looking at when I talked to Katie was about how we deal with things in the legislature and how we will be opposing, the process and what David Eby has been doing to that's been very destructive for the province of British Columbia. This is something that, of course, is different in terms of elections. And should this overturn, obviously that would mean a by-election, and we'll see what the outcome of that by-election would be. Should a judge ultimately rule in favor of the plaintiff.
Premier Eby said yesterday about your allegations, and this is a quote from him, "It's all a little cringe. I've got to say that if this is how he wants to spend his time, it's okay. It does have echoes of American-style politics that he's been trying to bring to our province." And so I guess the question for you is, what is the point of this? I mean, is the point of your complaint to try to undermine confidence in the electoral system in BC so people no longer trust it?
I understand how David Eby would like to frame it that way. Quite frankly, he's used to false information and misleading comments.
Sorry, that's me asking you the question.
I understand that, but it's also the comments that he made. But I will say this, the whole purpose of this and the reason why we did not come forward with anything beforehand is our goal here is actually to protect and strengthen the democratic process in British Columbia so that people have confidence in it. This is how you do that. By going through in this process, not just by blindly accepting and letting rumors and innuendos, go out there. Let's get to the bottom of this. Why would David Eby oppose the idea of an independent review? What does he have to hide?
I guess rumor and innuendo is subjective because much of what you have presented as evidence is so far rumor and innuendo and unsubstantiated.
Well, like I say, there are affidavits that are brought in court. People have sworn affidavits. You'll see that information as it's brought forward. But once again, I would say this. If David Eby thinks there's no problem, let's do a full independent review of the process and reveal whatever has gone on. If he thinks there's nothing wrong with it, then what's wrong with doing an independent review? What is it he's hiding?
John Rustad, very good to speak with you this morning. Really appreciate you taking the time with us. Thank you.